I love this quote from the episode. The fall at second base, turns out that's what got me on the national team. And maybe it's the reason I have my daughter today. In today's episode of The Mike Method, you're going to hear how Carly Moir, founder and CEO of White Canvas, turned resilience, vision, and a triple threat mindset into a powerhouse design agency, all rooted in heart. Welcome back to The Mike Method. Today, I'm joined by Carly Moir, a creative force who's redefining what it means to lead with purpose in a world of branding and design. She's the founder of White Canvas, an all-female, hyper-local boutique agency with national impact. Carly is a former national softball team captain turned entrepreneur, a published author, and a champion for women in business. But this isn't just a conversation about creative direction. It's about the power of staying in the game when the bases fall out from under you. Literally. We unpack the emotional intelligence behind great branding, the misalignment that can tank team culture, and why AI isn't coming for your job, but the person who learns to use it well might be. You'll also hear why she thinks AI is a golden retriever with a pencil, how sports leadership shaped her approach to business, the power of a custom GPT to roll out a brand voice, and what her 90-year-old self would tell her today. This is an episode about branding, authenticity, and leadership. But more than that, it's about how the hardest moments in life can become the most pivotal. Let's dive in. Carly, I really appreciate you making time to be on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
So as a hyper-local boutique design firm, I am quite curious to know what's the conversation that you're having in the background around AI. I mean, it seems to be affecting every industry right now. And I hear anything from, oh, it's not affecting us at all. And my first thought is yet. And I'm just curious for you, what's the conversation that the industry isn't having that needs to be having around AI?
I love that you've opened with like the most polarizing question to start off the podcast. But yeah, I think that is very much what it is it is like these two, it feels like very binary camps of AI is going to replace our jobs as creatives, and like people are very scared of it. And then the other camp is very much like, how do we adopt this and kind of use it to make what we're already doing better, or the client experience better, or get to our ideas to fruition quicker. So I went to an industry event a couple of months ago, and it was all surrounding this topic. And I felt pretty bad for the speaker because he was a pretty notable speaker. And in a live audience, he kind of opened with like, what does everyone think of AI? And it was a room full of like web designers and web developers and graphic designers. And he immediately got almost like eaten alive, like with kind of these very, I would say, aggressive questions about his stance on AI. And it just became this like weird energy in the room. And it was in that moment that I was like, wow, I guess people are feeling a little bit scared. This was like a room of 300 people. And that's where it first kind of came up for me. I was like, wow, I didn't realize this was as fear-based as I thought.
What I think is interesting about it is it's kind of like having a room full of people that sell calculators and then asking them what they think about spreadsheets.
Yeah, so true.
Right? Like you can like figure it out fast because it's like going to be in every space and place, right? And I think the more entrepreneurs that I hear that say, well, it hasn't affected us yet, we don't have an AI strategy, we don't really see how it fits. I'm like, well, all your competitors are figuring this out. And whoever figures this out, maybe not first, you don't have to have first mover advantage, but you kind of need to have second mover advantage. Like you need to be talking about it, you need to be thinking about it because your clients are. And so like if your competitors are and your clients are and you aren't, that's a problem.
It is a problem. And I think very much I just naturally fell into like, this is so cool. Like, let's bring on AI. And like, we've been, scaling up our team and getting education and whatnot. And, I just look for areas where it could solve pain points of what we're already doing. And to me, it's very much, it's a tool, like not a creativity replacement. I think I heard someone coin it as like AI is the new pencil. Like it's the next thing to create with. And being open to that, I think, is going to be super important.
Yeah, my example of it is there was an abacus and then somebody invented a calculator and then somebody invented a spreadsheet, right? Like we think about going back to an abacus to do accounting, like we just wouldn't, right? Like it doesn't make any sense.
Wouldn't.
Yeah. And I still think there's, I think in the creative space, I really like that, your viewpoint that creativity still requires a human element. And I think that anybody who's played with generative AI and asked it to come up with ideas, like I was working on a title for something yesterday And I said, well, come up with some ideas, because I'm still feeling like the subtitle, that I like the title, but the subtitle's like meh, and it needs to be punchier. And two of them were great, and the other bunch of them sucked. But the thing is, the only reason I knew that two of them were great is because I have a background in the thing I was talking to it about.
Yeah, you have discernment to
Right?
be able to know what is good versus
Yeah.
just taking it at face value as to like, this is what ChatGPT says is gold, right? It not definitely isn't the case. I think it's almost like I think I heard it described as like it's a young intern. Like you need to nurture it and train it like AI is an intern. Like you can't just ask it almost at gospel, like what should I do here? Or for those big important, I think ideations, like that needs to still be human and come from a place of, I think, emotional intelligence and have that authenticity to it.
I think it's also it's a young intern blended with a golden retriever, because
Oh my
it's
gosh.
right, like it's trying to please you all the time, and so it's leading you to the thing it thinks you want. Whereas a lot of the times with creativity, it's the thing you don't think of that's actually the creative piece of it, right? And there's such value. I actually had a gentleman on the podcast recently, and he said, their research on creativity and AI is that you bring together the group to brainstorm first. And once you feel like you've kind of got all the ideas out on the table, you put those into ChatGPT and say, this is what we've come up with so far. Expand this even further. And then you start applying constraints to it to say, it has to do this, it has to do this, it can't do this. And with those constraints, that's where you get this sort of additive creativity that comes out of ChatGPT. But the next step is to bring that back to the group again and say, okay, this is the piece of the puzzle. So it is really thinking of it as a tool, and you don't just start there. You start with an actual group discussion to bring that human element in, and then you insert the tool as it makes sense to have the tool as part of that conversation.
Yeah, totally. And I think to also help you roll out something you've already created, like we're already looking ahead and trying to figure out, like we spend a lot of time building brands from the ground up and, everything from the strategy side to the brand voice and personality and the written aspect, as well as the visual identity. And so it's what we see as a key challenge is we hand over the keys to this shiny new brand kit. And then the organizations, especially the larger ones, they have trouble rolling it out consistently. So we're like, well, how can we support that, right? So they are more successful in that execution piece. So like even building out something like a brand voice, like for your organization, like into a custom GPT. I'm like, well, that's huge, like something we're working on for ourselves as a bit of a pilot. But I think it's just, there's ways that it can save time. And I think just like create that consistency and that bridge as much as it can consolidate ideas.
Yeah, I think, the people that are worried that AI is going to take their job, I think who's going to take their job is somebody that does their job that is well versed in how to use AI. So,
absolutely.
Right? If you think of a competitive edge, right? Like if you've got two people and they do a similar job, they have a similar background, educational background, experiential background, a number of years in the workforce, whatever. You put those two people together and one of them is able to use generative AI and use it as a tool to help to support either their creativity or their decision making, their thought process. That person is more marketable in the industry today. So the AI itself is not stealing your job. It's the person, your peer, that's able to use it most effectively.
Totally. And I even think back to before I started White Canvas, like this was my first job out of university was working in print media. And it was a union position because I was like a production artist and I'm designing, newspaper ads or magazine ads. And I remember I was like the youngest by far of anyone like in the production department. And I remember having to show my manager who had been, had a lot more seniority than me. Like she didn't know how to even use like Adobe products that well, right? Because she came from the era of when advertising was like literally like, the letter blocks and like cut and paste typesets. And she like, desktop publishing came into it and she kind of had to learn the basics to do her job, but she didn't, she didn't go to school for that. Like she didn't, or that whole department didn't really. And then funny enough, to your point, like when the union collapsed and like the media kind of took that away, I was like, well, I think I'm going to go start White Canvas now. But a lot of people in our industry, like they didn't have that true expertise because they had only used the tool to a point or only gotten it to where they really needed to in that role.
What do you think are the most creative uses that you've seen out in the kind of marketing design space so far in terms of how either clients, competitors, or just the industry at large is actually using AI on a day-to-day basis?
I think that's an interesting question. For me, I think you have to be really careful with the generative AI side of things, especially when there's like a human aspect kind of layered in. I think anytime that I've seen it, if you can feed it real examples of things that you know to be good or that you've already created for your brand, then it seems to be, it'll do its job again, like an intern, a little bit better. I get a little bit wary when, like you ask it to have people in it, in a video or in a photo or like an ad campaign. Like to me, there's something about it still that feels, I don't know about you, but it just feels like fake. And I just think loses that touch of maybe producing creative in real time. So I think it's great for like, maybe if it's product based, like for generating video or imagery, in certain ways. But yeah, the human side, you need to have models. I think that's still right now, at least, like you're better off kind of going to do like a standard shoot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we're probably 3 to 6 months away from that being actually fixed.
Totally.
You look at the progress they've made in the last 6 months, and you think if we think it's on an exponential curve, then we'll be at the level of being able to produce a commercial that side by side you wouldn't be able to tell whether or not the actors are real or not. But you're right now, like that's probably 6 months away, maybe. Like right now, definitely. I mean, I see all these Instagram reels, right, where people talking, and there's just something creepy about that's the best word I can come up with about the interaction. And usually it's a meme or a joke that's going back and forth, right? And but there's just something about the way that it looks. It just is like my spidey senses go off. Like this is 100% AI. And then there's other times where I'm like, I can't believe I got caught out by that, because they blatantly tell you it's AI by doing something ridiculous, like an animal does something it's not capable of, and you're like, oh, I thought that was real. So we're kind of on that border right now. And, I think, I still look back to shows like Mad Men, and I think about the fun, okay, take away the misogyny and like all the other crap that was going on, the lack of environmental awareness, rampant smoking and drinking in the office, all of that aside. But if you look at the ad game that was going on when, Madison Avenue kind of took off in that show, and just there's an emotional content to branding and design. It's like this feeling and emotion that is created by just really great work. Like, where's your thought on that versus what we see coming out of AI today?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, Don Draper, to your point, outside of all of the sexism and whatnot in that show, probably made me want to be a creative director or creative more than anything. Yeah, there was something about that show that it was just, it was very interesting. But I definitely think that I think, okay, this is how I like to explain it. When people kind of come to me and they say, Carly, what's the ROI of branding, right? And which is a question that's so interesting to me, because it's very different. I usually have to educate. And I'm like, well, it's very different than marketing. Like marketing are like all the tactics that you do. And like, it's very much attached to performance and stats and analytics. And brand on the other side is very much like driven by emotion to me. Like it's driven by, what am I building out? Like if my business were a person, like how would it act? How would it talk? What does it stand for? What are its values? And then I think from the visual standpoint, like how does it dress? Like what's its style and whatnot? And how is it perceived? If it were to be at a party, like how would you describe them? And so I think that side of it is always going to be emotional to me. It's always going to be like, that's the product, whether you're service-based or product-based. And that to me is a side of it that you don't want to be artificial, I guess, in that no matter where you are in your kind of business building journey, that's the piece to me that needs to stay authentic. I think there's way more opportunity on the marketing side, which is like the tactics and the execution. Like to me, that's going to get you people to learn about your story and your product quicker. And I think in a broader way.
I always think of branding, like when people say like, what's the ROI of branding? I'm kind of like, well, what was the ROI of you deciding to wear what you wore today?
Yeah.
because like we're all making these decisions and we're kind of branding ourselves by the clothes that we choose to put on every day, the way we style our hair, for men, facial hair, like whatever. There's all these things, jewelry that we wear. All of these things are personally a part of our brand. And, for people who like having a great brand out there from a style perspective, they put work into it. But similarly with a company, I think the same thing is true, right? Like, so, people are witnessing and experiencing our brand. And as human beings, we're kind of lazy and we pigeonhole. We pigeonhole people. We look at them. If we haven't met them before, we look at what they're wearing, how they're walking, how they speak. And right away, we make a whole bunch of assumptions about who they are in the world, whether or not they're true or not.
We absolutely do. And I think that in the same breath, we see brands who are like, well, just make us, we want to look modern. We want to look innovative. We want to feel this way, and whatnot. And then, so you can dress it all up equally, but then if someone comes in to experience your product, experience your service, whatever that is, and it's not consistent with that appearance or what you thought it was going to be, like that's also when we see like trust is lost. So there's so much built into the brand experience that gets forgotten about as well. It's like branding is so much more than just the logo or what you wear. It's like how you actually do things.
I feel like that it's like, if we stick with this clothing or, personal appearance sort of thing, it's like the outward facing brand of the company is the clothing and what you're wearing and, jewelry, whatever else. That's what people see. But then your character of who you are as a human being, that's kind of like the internal brand. Just the same way when customers get an opportunity to get inside your business and like experience what it's like to be a customer, that's like the character portion of the brand that is really truly the most meaningful piece. Because how many people go back to a company, especially in the B2B world, do you go back to the company when they become a vendor of yours or a partner? Do you go back to their website? No, because you're in business with them now. So the brand is now, how do people talk to me? Are people on time for meetings? Like, what is it like to get emails back and forth? Like when they start a meeting, are they kind? Are they checking in? Are they all business, right? Like what is their way of approaching difficult conversations, for instance? That's all part of the brand. And I'm not then going back to the website and going, oh, right, okay, good. I feel so good because the website looks nice.
It's so true. It's really like, that's the first impression piece. And then it's everything else, I think, that leaves. And what you're speaking to is very much what we call like the brand heart. It is like, what are the guiding principles? And this bleeds over a little bit into, like, I would say team culture as well, right? It's like, what are the values guiding? What is the North Star, the purpose of the business? And is that, again, like authentic and aligned with everything you're seeing on the outside from that first interaction, even on that customer journey?
And then I think there's all other customers too, right? Like you've got people that want to work at your company. And so if you're in the hiring process and they see your job ad on like, LinkedIn or whatever, right? And then they apply and they check out your website, they check out your social and your Instagram and whatever, LinkedIn. And then they get in the interview process and doesn't quite seem like the company that it seems like on the outside. Then they get hired and all of a sudden they're like, wow, this culture does not match the way that this company purports to be in the world. And that misalignment can cause a lot of challenges because people then feel like, not duped, but they're like, well, this isn't the company that I thought it was. Like the brand internally as an employee doesn't match. And, we know like from a leadership development perspective that if internally people don't feel like the brand matches, that affects how they show up for clients of the company.
Absolutely. Especially in service-based, I would say. Yeah. You need like your employees are your brand ambassadors more than anything. And yeah, I think creating that alignment internally is huge.
Yeah, product companies can kind of get away with it sometimes because if they've got an awesome product and they've got great marketing and their culture is crap internally, it's going to cause a whole bunch of challenges internally, but then the product's really good and the marketing on it is great. And there's a ton of examples where that has worked okay. Now, the question is, it's worked okay, but financially and from a return on shareholder investment, like how much better could that company be?
Have been, yeah.
Right? Could actually be succeeding in the world. And then, my company's been a B Corp since 2018. We look at our team members, our vendors, our partners, our clients, the environment, the charities we support. They're all stakeholders in our business. So when we think about brand, we're thinking about everybody that touches our ecosystem is experiencing our brand in some way, not just somebody who's buying a product from us.
No, I love that too. And I think I love that you have this, broad impact, but still with like a community based, I think purpose is really similar to White Canvas and what we've tried to build. And, I started the company 13 years ago now, and it was just me at the time. And back then it was kind of like, I remember I only had maybe $2,000 a month in solidified revenue. And I was like,
Yeah.
I'm just going to go for it like a crazy person. But at the time, the point was we're just kind of supporting and working with a lot of small businesses, right? And like the hyper local kind of mom and pop shops. And then as we grew and expanded out the agency, like we've gotten more into obviously like the larger corporations or larger brands and supporting big nonprofits. But I guess the point of it all being like, I still feel that our brand heart is that like community building aspect. How is what we're doing giving back and like serving on a grander scale? And how are we leaving, I guess, this world like better than we found it in the small way that we're kind of operating?
I was thinking about when we were coming into this podcast, the fact that you and I both being in B2B businesses that are in the service space, but in particularly what we do, how White Canvas shows up in the world, but what it's like to work with you is the expression of what you think or what you've created as a brand. And so your customers are seeing that to see the level of trust that they'll have in you. Similarly, like how we show up in relationship as being leaders in our space matters to our clients in terms of how it is to work with us, because we're trying to show their leaders there's a different way of being in the world. And so we need to be modeling that in our own business. And so I just thought of that kinship between the model that you've built as an entrepreneur and the one that we built here, that we truly need to embody the work that we do to have credibility out there in the world.
Absolutely. And I think that energy, it goes both ways. Like you're going to attract that back, especially in a B2B. That's the intent. And you can feel it very quickly, like when a client, is not for you.
Right?
Yeah.
So White Canvas is an all female led company, and you're hyper local. I would love for you to maybe share a little bit about how you're like being a high level athlete, how that has actually shaped and driven how you have seen your career growth. Like, what's the connection?
Well, I mean, it probably started very early on the playground when I think I was in the 3rd grade, and a boy told me at school that girls weren't as good at sports as boys were, to which I was stubborn. I was like, I play softball, I'll show you. But no, like growing up, I was always very much into softball. I met still all of my best friends till this day, are my softball girls, I guess I'll call them. I played, at university. I played on scholarship at Simon Fraser University, in Burnaby. And also, for the junior women's national team, I was the team captain. I'm going to date myself, but in 2006 to 2008. So those experiences for me, I guess, really shaped early on and kind of all through, kind of, especially my young professional years, like what it meant for a group of women to work towards a common goal, but also be working on individual goals. And I think I just saw in the world of sport, like that power and like what that could look like. And just for me, as much as I started White Canvas very much as a solopreneur, like as I started to build the company, that became really important to me to kind of like bring into our culture. And I didn't realize perhaps I was doing it consciously at first. I often refer to myself as like an accidental entrepreneur. I was just loved what I did. And I very much was like, oh, I'm really busy, I should hire someone. We're really busy, we should hire someone again. Like I didn't go into it, like I bootstrapped the whole thing, and I would just be really good at saving, and I would just hire another person and hire another person. And, today we have, I think, 14 full-time women working, and it's like my job has totally changed. But I think some of those elements of going back to like the sports, there's so many lessons in like resilience and leadership and adversity, I think, that you get from sport that can't be taught anywhere else.
I think the current stat is that 92% of female leaders have a background in high school and collegiate sports.
Really? I mean, I'm going to use that. That's great.
Yeah, it's a very high, because the skill set that's learned, particularly being on a team, there is a culture in every sports team. right? It's a
For
little bit
sure.
set by the coach. Captain definitely has a lot of influence, the assistant captain. And those skills learned at a young age are very different than trying to teach an adult that who just didn't grow up with that type of experience. And so partly it's getting great coaching. So you know what great coaching looks like, right? Being in a team environment and understanding that we only win when we all win versus, things like individual sports where it's really all about me and my success. But overall, sports play a pretty significant factor in driving leadership for women in particular, as it turns out. So not surprised. I wasn't surprised to hear your collegiate background. It's also a very common thing in entrepreneurship, right? Because obviously entrepreneurship, to be an entrepreneur, to move from solo entrepreneur, you have to have this ability to play a team sport. And that team sport is the business that you're in. Like, you've got to be able to build a culture. You've got to be able to deal with conflict. You have to realize you're working with different personality styles. You have to be willing to work with people who are better than you at things that are required for the team. You have to understand what shared leadership looks like. There's all of these skills are skills that you can learn on the diamond. You can learn it on the field. You can learn it on a rink, right? Like, they just don't get, other than that, there isn't an opportunity really in school. We don't teach these skills. They're not actually learned in the classroom. They're learned outside the classroom, and they're not even learned in PE. They're learned after school. Right? They're learned on the weekends. They're learned in the evenings when it's pouring rain and you're out there practicing. That's when these skills are actually learned.
Yeah. And I think it's also a deeper connection, like the things you go through as a team, like victory, defeat, all of those kind of classic, I love, like, Remember the Titans, like all of those classic sports movies. Like, it really does feel like that. Like, I can still feel, if I close my eyes, like, I can feel when we won, like, the national championship in my 4th year at SFU. And it was like, I think the papers wrote it as like the Cinderella story because we were so bad that year. But it was like, we somehow just showed up for the last tournament. We were like seated last in the nationals, and we, like, to the point where, like, our parents didn't even come, like, because we were in Alabama for this, and they're like, there's no way, like, we're not investing in this. And so we were literally by ourselves, no fans, only Canadian team there, and like, won that year. But I think, like, I can still feel that. I can smell the field, like, I can see the throw going to home where, like, our catcher tagged the girl out to, like, end the game, and I don't know, like, there's some magic in it. And I think, to your point of, like, the individual and team sport, like softball and baseball are very interesting in that way, because so much of it is an individual sport, because it's like, you're going up to bat, you have your own stats, and it is like, I do individually have to perform, but how does that performance fit together, into the bigger span of the game or the team?
Well, and it's interesting because, the differential, like I always say, like, track teams, except for relays, are really track groups.
Right. Yes.
Versus, like, if you're playing softball or hockey or basketball or volleyball, like, there's one score, and you could be MVP on your team for the game and lose the game. You could have the most, right? You could have your best game ever, and then you look up at the score and we lost. And so those are really the differences between how teams operate and groups operate. And we see that in our world. We see it for leadership teams, right? If they understand that with the company only wins, that's it. Like, either the team wins and the company wins, but there's no, well, I won, but the company's not doing well, or our executive team is struggling. Like, that doesn't work. Right. And so we say, well, those are more like track teams than they are like football, soccer, softball teams, right? They're just not the same thing. And it's really difficult to ingrain that into someone that didn't grow up with that. It's hard to have them, because you have, like, when you talk about that, you're talking about a visceral experience. You say, I remember the smell of the grass. I remember looking up at the scoreboard. I remember the sun. Like, it's like in your cells. That's very different than, an adult who hasn't had that, like, in their body, basically trying to explain to them why that's important and why them being successful is just not enough.
Yeah. And I think equally, like, on the side of, the not so great moments, like outside of victory or like defeat or setbacks, like, I have equally vivid memory of being at the tryouts for the junior women's national team. And I was, in a seat, there was 200 people trying out, and we all had to wear the same thing. We were given like a red t-shirt with a number on the back. And I remember being the first up to bat, and we were doing scrimmages, and I hit a bomb over right field head. I was stoked. I was like, yes, I look so good. And so I'm like, I knew it was going to be a triple. So I'm like going to round second base to get to third. And because it was the first game of the day, they had not double checked all the bases were down properly. And so second base was actually loose. So you can imagine at like full tilt, I'm going to cut second base and it like just basically slides out from underneath me. And I fell to the ground and I'm like, my knee. And I remember like crawling back to like what would have been second base because I'm like, I don't want to be out, right? Yeah. Like that's the first thing that comes to mind. But like my knee was just messed. And the whole rest of the weekend, I got it checked out and they're like, yeah, like you tore your MCL or whatever it is. And I think I looked at my dad and I was like, but it's tryouts. Like, can I go back? And, he said, yeah, fine. Like, this is your goal. Slapped on a knee brace and probably had the worst tryout of my life, like the rest of the weekend, because I couldn't operate the way I used to, but I made it to the next round. And when I asked the coaches later, I said, why did you pick me? And they're like, well, for one, you showed more resilience than the other 199 people who were here. Like you showed up, you kept going, like you faced adversity and you kept doing what, like we could see the heart, like we could see like how much this meant to you. And of course they had to look at my stats and knew I was good, obviously before that. But for the most part, like I thought, wow, like that defeat, which should have been so devastating to like an athlete's career, was actually like what made me recognize and what made me stand out.
So with that story of failure in mind and realizing what you needed to do with that, and then, the other failures that you had in your life, like if you had a chance to go back and talk to like yourself at like, you pick an age, like 10 years old, 8 years old, 12, I don't know, some younger version of Carly, to like bring back a message about failure, what would you want her to hear from you?
I mean, I think some of the times where I've failed, even though in the moment it makes zero sense, and I'm sure anyone can relate to this, that it somehow does lead to something bigger that maybe you didn't plan, that just like surrendering to like not trying to control it and not trying to dwell in it, because not only did that fall, help me get, onto the junior national team, it actually like, it was there that the SFU coach saw that whole thing happen. Yeah. And he actually like, that's where he offered me the position at SFU. Well, it was at SFU that I met my partner, my ex-husband now, but like my partner at the time. And like, we had a family, like I have a daughter. So it's like, if you really trace back all of the moments in many ways, arguably like maybe my daughter wouldn't be here if I wouldn't have fallen at second base. I don't know. It's kind of wild to think of.
It kind of reminds me, there was that Gwyneth Paltrow movie called Sliding Doors. I don't know if you ever saw that.
I have not seen it.
Yeah, so the premise of the movie is pretty straightforward. At the very beginning of the movie, she is running to catch a subway, and I think it's in New York. And she's running to catch the subway, and then the screen splits. And on one screen, she catches the subway, and on the other screen, she misses it.
Oh, wow.
And the movie continues split screen for the rest of the movie in different timelines of how the rest of her life changed as a result of just the getting on the subway or not getting on the subway. And it's really a testament to what you just said, in that, we think these things that occur in our lives are like, we label them as either good, objectively good or bad, right? Like this is a good thing that happened or it's a bad thing that happened. We don't really know, because, if we feel really good about where we're at right now, and then we look back on our life and we say, well, oh man, some of those things that occurred, I wish they didn't occur. But then, as you say, maybe I wouldn't have my daughter. Like, okay, that's hard to process. I'm like, oh, it's hard to go through that thing, but I'm so grateful because it kind of led to the life I have now. I'm curious with that same lens, if your 90-year-old self could have that lens and could come back to you today, what would your 90-year-old self say to you now with that same lens?
That was probably the first of many loose spaces that you were going to endure. I think my 90-year-old self would tell me it all happened exactly the way it was supposed to. And maybe that, I think that's the gratitude with aging, is that you have that ability to reflect and make sense and meaning perhaps out of your story. But I think that a lot of the, resilience, even in that one example, is brought forward into it's brought into leadership, it's brought into business. Like there are many times, I think I read in a book, it was like every business has 3 near-death experiences. It's like, well, that's terrifying. Great. I feel like I've only had like one. But I think that just knowing that it's going to be hard, and that when it gets hard, trusting that you'll know what to do and you'll have the support that you need at the time to deal with it, and it will all make sense eventually at some point.
I think that last statement is the one that's the hardest to like I find the hardest to embody in the moment, which is like,
are you a type A? Are you a
Yeah.
control person like me? Yeah.
100%. And
I just want to know.
Diagnosed ADD, which means I have the worry gene. And so for me in the moment, it's like, I apply a lot of meaning, and I'm trying, my big work right now is trying to not apply this subjective meaning to everything and try to objectively say this thing occurred. I don't know whether it's good or bad. We'll see. And I have to wait to see how it all plays out, because I as you say, like I have this benefit of age now. I can look back on my life and say, well, all of the bad things that occurred so far have led me to where I am right now. Maybe I wouldn't have met my wife. Maybe I wouldn't have, met my, had a daughter. Maybe I wouldn't have decided to become an entrepreneur 25 years ago, right? Like I all of these things are all interconnected, and I wouldn't be living where I'm living right now. Like I don't know the life that I would live, and I feel such gratitude for the one that I have. And so, but holding on to that day to day is for me right now the work.
Yeah, I love that, and it's like, it's not good or bad. It just is. And we don't need to attach the meaning to it. I think that's our brain playing tricks on us, right? Like, don't believe every thought.
Well, we're kind of like, it's funny because it's kind of our human condition, right? Like we need to be meaning making machines, and we need to make assumptions because it's kind of how it protects us in the world, right? Like if we made no assumptions, and we could just drive wherever we wanted with our cars and ignore all the street signs and everything else. But we make assumptions that like people are going to obey the rules of the road. Otherwise, nobody could ever drive, right? Because cars are everywhere. If it's dark and we're walking, we have to make assumptions about, is this person like friend or foe? Like that's sort of built into our reptilian brain. But we live in the safest time to be alive today. And most of the things that we fear are things we apply meaning to that may or may not occur. And I know most of the things I've worried about because I actually write down every day what I'm worried about. And so I can go back, and I've been doing this for how many days now? Like 1,200, over 1,300 days. I've been writing down my worries every day. And so I can go back and look at all the things I've worried about. And I can definitively say, because I've done this, that like 99.5% of the things I worry about are inconsequential. And I even forgot that I worried about it.
Yeah. I kind of have something similar. That's impressive. But in the reverse, where I have like an evidence journal, and my coach.
How's it work?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So basically the evidence journal is like, because anytime, and I think we're lying if we say you don't get into this headspace as an entrepreneur or a leader, you do. Yeah. If you get into a moment of self-doubt, or you're worried about whatever said thing, making sure you have an evidence journal. So I have this like notes just in my phone, and every time I do, it sounds like cheesy, but anytime there's sort of something I achieve or the business achieves, or we're recognized for something, or we helped a certain business, or like those wins, I write it all down in the evidence journal, and I will go back to it in kind of those dark moments to kind of be like, no, like, my brain telling me I'm not good at public speaking, right? And it's like, go back. Okay, you've been on so many podcasts. You've spoken at keynote events, and like just having evidence of the thing that you're worrying about, I think to go back to is like, okay, brain, like you're saying this, but I know this to be true.
I love this. I love that approach to an evidence journal. It's because it's also gratitude, right? Like it's both evidence and gratitude at the same time that you have in one system. I think I could I have an example for you. Like I had when the recession happened in 2009, I was in the worst financial shape I've ever been in my life. And, so much debt. And I went to the bank and I took out, $400 bills. And I didn't even have cash in the bank. I was taking it off a credit line, but I stuck the $400 bills. I can't even remember why I picked $400, but that was the number. And I stuck the $400 bills in my wallet. Because every time I opened my wallet and I saw that, I felt like, oh wow, there's like $400 in here and it's hundreds, right? And so it just made me feel wealthy, even though it's not like a giant sum of money. But when I opened it, there was always $400 in there. What was really interesting is that when I would open my wallet to pay for something and people saw me going in, because I always have like 20s and 10s, whatever in there,
Yeah.
they'd be like, are those all hundreds? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, holy crap, like how much money do you carry around? And I'm like, I don't just have like hundreds because then it's just more efficient and whatever. But the other people's reaction to it actually like emboldened me because it was like, oh, right, yeah, like I felt this way. And I kept doing that until the wealth was there. And then I was like, I don't need to carry these around anymore. I remember the day that I decided that I was good, that I didn't need that, but that was my evidence. It was kind of like proving to my subconscious that I was going to be okay. Because look, there was wealth every time I opened my wallet.
I love that story. And it's like such a, I think, evidence of like the power of mindset too. Like to have that reminder is like, no, like I've got this. And not even, I don't love the fake it till you make it thing, but it is remembering there are things to be grateful for and kind of focus your energy on. And what I need to know is like, what did you eventually spend the four $100 bills on? Or do you still have it like framed somewhere?
No, weirdly, I never spent them.
Really?
Yeah, because well, it's weird because I just held on to them until I didn't need them. Like I never spent them on something in particular. I just then when I
Okay.
realized I didn't
Yeah.
need it anymore, I'm like, well, I'll just spend them. And then I'm like,
Yeah.
then I decided, well, how much cash do I need to carry? And I'm like, well, what would be
Yeah.
convenient is if I had 100, a 50, a 20, a 10, and a 5. Those denominations I can make other denominations out of. This is back when cash mattered. And so then I just had those denominations in my wallet. And so I'm
Okay.
like, with this money, I can do most things and I don't need to worry,
Hmm.
So I would just pull, if I didn't want to, I'd pull that out of the wallet and a credit card and just stuff it in my jeans to go somewhere. And I'm like, I have enough money with my credit card and this to pay for pretty much anything. If I need a taxi, if whatever, I can pay for it with these things. But I never actually went and applied it to something material because it wasn't about if I could buy something with it. It was the abundance that I felt by actually
Mm,
having it in place, right? It was the
I love
evidence
that.
part of it that
Yeah,
mattered to me. So,
that's fair. I just anticipated you saying like I had a big dinner out with my wife or something and we celebrated, but
yeah, it's funny. The celebration actually was when I wrote the last $10,000 check to get to zero. And so I remember writing the check and handing it over. And I'm like, I'm at zero. Like, I
mm,
can't believe I got to zero. Like, and then it was interesting. My mentor said to me, don't make any major decisions in your life until you get to zero. And when you get to zero, then decide what you want to do next. And when I got to zero, for some reason, I had a very different perspective on everything. I enjoyed the business more. I was more excited about life. And I realized it was the weight of the debt that made me feel that way because the debt wasn't generative debt. Like, it's not like I was like a
right.
mortgage or something, right? Like it was debt that was associated to business and personal. And I was like, oh, I just got to get out from under this. So once I had recovered and I got to zero, I'm like, oh, I love what I do. I love what's going on. And I realized that it was clouding. It was like, like not the opposite of rose colored glasses. It was making everything look darker than it actually
Like
was.
foggy.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
made it look foggy. Yeah, that's probably the best example or best analogy. And so, yeah, once I got past that, then all of a sudden I'm like, okay, I just feel differently about everything. And I've told that story to a number of people that have been in crisis in their business. And they're like, I got to do something else. And I'm like, let's just get you to zero. Because my
Hmm.
experience of getting to zero was quite profound and not what I expected in such a positive way. And then make a decision from there. You may make a different decision when you get to zero.
I mean, I think getting to zero can be symbolic of, not just finance, but just the moments you get to zero as a business owner. But no, that's a pretty incredible story. Thank you for sharing.
I would love to leave on one anecdote that, how old is your daughter?
She's 7.
I would love to leave on the one anecdote that if you could tell 7-year-old Carly this anecdote, you kind of can because you got a 7-year-old daughter. What is
And I coach her and she plays softball.
Oh,
So
she
yeah,
does.
right.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
but like life lesson overall. So not even just relative to sports, but if there was a life lesson that you could tell your 7-year-old self, because she's in grade 2.
Yep. Just started grade 2.
So if you could go back to grade 2 and tell yourself something, and mentor yourself, what would be that thing that you would tell your daughter today that would be like mentoring your younger self?
I think that the biggest takeaway I would want her to have is that she, as much as she will achieve, and I'm sure I believe she's going to do great things. What I would want for her to know is that she is worthy of love just the way she is, and that all of those external validation pieces or whatever that outside success looks like, although it's nice to have, right? And nice to receive, it's not what matters, and that she doesn't need it for validation, and that she's perfect the way she is. I think there's, that confidence piece and just knowing that she has everything she needs already within her.
I love that. That is such a beautiful
Mm-hmm.
way for us to wrap our conversation. Carly, thank you so much for making time to be on the
Yeah.
podcast today.
Thank you for having me.